Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Free Plugin Friday, where we take a look at free plugins that could help in your productions. Now, before we get into the plugin, I just want to ask you to please like this video if you enjoy the content and subscribe for more free plugins and various other videos. It's really helpful to get my videos out there and kind of get the algorithm pushing videos, and it just means I'm more likely to put more effort in and do more videos, so it would be really cool if you could do that. So the plugin we're looking at today is the XS-707 by 12BitZ. Now, from the name, you might gather what this is. It's basically a marriage of two really cool vintage pieces of gear to give you these really cool drum samples. So it's a 707, that's the basis for the sound. Famous drum machine by Roland, the brother of the 909 and 808. And that has been sampled with an EMU Emax sampler, which was a 12-bit sampler. Which is really cool because you're not only getting that vintage 707 sound, but you're getting it sampled in a similar way that a lot of dance artists were sampling stuff in the 90s, where they used a lot of these samplers, Ackey's and EMU samplers, to get that kind of sound. It's just part of it. The 12-bit sample, the kind of lo-fi kind of digital sample thing was really part of that sound in hip-hop and dance music. And not only that, it's had some EQ stuff done and a tube preamp as well to add some warmth, so it's got that really kind of vintage thing going on. What's really cool is just how many samples are in there. Now you're thinking 707, you might be like, oh, I've got a couple of sample packs of 707s, you know, there's like 3 different velocities for kick and stuff, and you know, that's cool. This has almost 2,000 samples across all of them, and you know, it's all dynamically put into the plugin, easy to use, but something that, say, in battery, putting 2,000 samples and getting it all to work is a pain in the ass and takes a long time. So to have that really kind of gives you the flavor of that 707. There's something about those vintage drum machines that sounds organic, even though sometimes they were just playing samples. Just these little idiosyncrasies as they played sounds more organic than just a single sample repeated in your DAW. So to have all those samples in there is really cool, especially for a free plugin. So let's have a look at the features. The top panel here is your kind of global controls. You have a dynamic range, filter, and master level. Dynamic range obviously controls the amount of dynamic range that you have. Now, I'm not sure if this is just changing how many samples you're using or it's just the volume of each of the samples, but it's really good to have a global control to really kind of rein in that dynamic range. You have a filter, so you have a low pass and a high pass filter. If we quickly just listen to them, I'll just put a snare on. Or low pass. Kind of standard filter, but pretty kind of nice to have as a feature, and of course a master level. Now you also have a pitch control here. Now I believe this is global, which is pretty cool. It'd be nice to have pitch controls for everything, but it is pretty cool to just have a global pitch control if you just want to go for a different sound. Now underneath that is each separate drum. So you got 2 bass drums, 2 snares, rim, clap, 2 hi-hats, open hi-hat, 3 toms, crash, ride, tambourine, and cowbell. And what is really cool, especially for a free plugin, because not many do this, is you can change the output. So if I wanted to go all outputs in Cubase, you can see here, depending on your DAW how it works, I could go send these out to their individual outputs as a VST instrument, which means then I could treat them all individually, which is awesome because a lot of plugins don't allow you to do that, especially ones that are kind of doing the rompler thing, and it really means you can really get in and get a sound for each different sound, if that makes sense. So you want a brighter snare, but you don't want to affect the bass drum, put an EQ on the snare. You want the claps to have reverb, nothing else to, you can use the claps like that. It's really awesome to be able to do that. Now we're just going to have it in the stereo channel while we're going through sounds, because we're not going to be doing any extra processing, but it's just a really good feature to have. And so each of these also have 3 different controls. You've got noise, which is really cool, so it just has the noise level. So let's have a listen to it on a snare again. I'm going to play snare. can really hear it there. If we do maybe, let's go this open hi-hat. I think open hi-hats are pretty good for this. It's just brighter and noisier with the noise up. On the kick, I don't know how much you can hear it. You can hear it a little bit. But it's a really cool feature to have to just get that vintage sampled kind of noise thing. I'm not exactly sure how this controller is working, whether it's changing samples in real time or it's just adding high end back in so you can actually hear that noise or getting rid of noise reduction. Not sure how it works, but sounds good. Then you've got pan, which is quite obvious. If you're using it like this, you can pan it whichever way you want. Obviously, if you're using the outputs all 16, then you'd probably use your DAW to do the panning. And same with gain. I mean, if it's clipping, but I'd like to use gain in my own channel. But if you're using it like I am here, where we've got one whole thing, so if we just like solo it and go through, you know, this loop or something, I could then pan and gain everything. So less of that, more clap, more kick, one kick, and pan that. Something like that. A bit more snare. So yeah, if you're using it in a single stereo channel like I am, having those controls is great. So let's just quickly listen to each of the kind of elements. I'm just going to play them on the keyboard through different velocities. I mean, it's a very simple plugin. There's not a lot to it. It just sounds how it sounds. But what we might do is have a go with the dynamic range down. So I'm going to turn the dynamic range all the way down. And actually, why don't we play this, right? We'll play this section here, which was a little drum roll you heard in the beginning, because that gave a good idea of changing dynamic range, right? See, the volume's still there, but can you hear the difference? So if you really listen to the snare there, with the dynamic range down, it is the same sample, but the volume goes up. With dynamic range up, each individual velocity is a different sample because it's been sampled at every velocity, right? And there's more high end coming through, so it sounds more like a realistic snare. Now that just might be a filter. I'm not sure how they've done it. I have never owned a 707, so I'm not sure how much a 707 does velocity. The 909s and 808s don't really do it properly. They just have like, I think 808 has just 3 velocity levels. But that's a really cool feature. So that's dynamic range. We kind of got that. The other is pitch. Let's do the same thing. Low pitch. Maybe some beat. You kind of get the idea of pitch. So now I'm just going to play through each of the samples and leave it there. So we're just going to go from low velocity to higher velocities. It's all really what my keyboard can do. So let's find the hi-hats. Does sound like a filter there. So there's not really much else to show. I've already showed it in context, and that's what it is. My only kind of thing is, it's kind of obvious that dynamic range filter, now I listen to it a bit, it's cool to have, and you can all turn it down, obviously. It's a bit too obvious. And everything's just a little bit dark. I think that's just because it's samples plus going to the sampler plus tube preamp. It's all just a bit dark, so it would be nice maybe even just to have like an EQ on there, but you can always EQ it yourself, or just like a brighter mode maybe where they've pushed the treble up a little bit. I mean, that's something with any kind of these samplers. They always have anti-aliasing filters so you don't get aliasing, and the lower bit rate, lower sample rate stuff tends to be filtered a lot, especially sample rate, because sample rate's the big one where the Nyquist frequency is. You obviously need a filter, and before we had really steep digital filters, you kind of had to get a bit darker, I think, because you didn't have that slope. Otherwise, you get aliasing. It really depends on the equipment. Now, I haven't used the EMU sampler before, so I'm not really sure how dark that is actually sampling. If that's part of it, it's just because it's 707 and a tube preamp. But yeah, you get my point. It could be a bit brighter, or it could do with some EQ, but you can just add your own EQ and try it for yourself. I've heard some darker samples, and I've heard some brighter samples in sample libraries and stuff, so it's really about taste. So thanks for watching. That has been the 12-bit Z XS-707. Given that it's free and fully featured, I'd just give it a go. Put it in your kind of library of VST plugins. Even if you have a 707 kind of sample pack already, I just think it's fairly easy to use and you might get some cool sounds out of it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.